The girl who learned to see the ocean.
I was born a disabled child. My legs were weak, my walk was unsteady, and my body carried a shape my mother believed the world would mock. She was afraid, terribly afraid, afraid that I would embarrass her, afraid that strangers would stare and laugh at me. So, for the first 8 years of my life, I was kept inside the house. My world was incredibly small. It was no bigger than the courtyard just outside our front door. That was my entire universe. From that little patch of dirt, I would watch flocks of birds fly high across the sky, soaring freely, disappearing into places I could never even imagine. I often wondered where they were going. What was out there? And what did it feel like to be that free? When I turned 8, my father passed away. It was a quiet, somber time. Not long after that, my mother she married a retired sailor from a nearby town. My mother was 40 years old. My stepfather was already over 60. He was a man with a weathered face, kind eyes, and hands that told stories of the sea. He told me to just call him Uncle. One afternoon, he knelt down in front of me, his knees cracking a little. He looked at me with a gentle smile and said, "Come here, let me take you outside." I was instantly terrified. The world outside, the one I'd been taught to fear. I backed away from him, shaking my head frantically. No, I can't." He looked at me, genuinely confused. "Why not, child?" he asked, his voice soft. "The world outside is beautiful. There's so much to see." I couldn't hold it in anymore. I finally whispered the truth. The truth my mother had so carefully planted in my heart for 8 long years. I'm ugly and disabled. I walk funny. Mom says people will laugh at me. As the words left my lips, I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. The weight of it all just came crashing down. He listened quietly. Then, he raised his strong sailor's fist into the air, the one that had probably pulled countless ropes and navigated through storms. He shook it playfully and said with a mock-serious face, "If anyone dares to say anything, I'll punch them like this." And he made a little whooshing sound. Through my tears, a sound I hadn't made in a very long time escaped me. I laughed. It was a real, genuine laugh that came from deep within. That was the first time I had laughed in years. It was in that moment, with his silly gesture and fierce protectiveness, that a tiny crack appeared in the wall my mother had built around me. He didn't see a source of shame. He saw a child who deserved to see the world, and he was ready to fight for my right to see it. That day, everything started to change. That day, my world started to grow. The next day, my stepfather took me into town. It was the first time I had ever been outside the walls of our home. I remember the shock of it all. People were everywhere, a sea of faces, a storm of sounds, a blur of motion. Too many faces, too many eyes. Too many eyes. I felt them on me, judging me, and an overwhelming shame washed over me. I lowered my head, my gaze fixed on the dusty ground, and clung tightly to the hem of his coat, trying to make myself as small as possible, like a frightened shadow hoping to disappear. Suddenly, his voice boomed, sharp and clear, like a sailor calling across a vast ocean. He shouted, "Lift your head." "What are you afraid of?" His voice wasn't angry, but it was firm, full of a strange confidence that startled me. Heads turned. People stopped and stared. I could feel their curiosity burning into me. Children my own age started whispering amongst themselves, pointing and giggling. My cheeks flushed hot, and I wanted nothing more than for the ground to swallow me whole. I expected him to pull me away, to hide me from their gazes, to scold me for drawing attention. But he didn't. Instead, a warm, genuine smile spread across his face. He looked at the group of whispering children and gestured for them to come closer. "Come here, kids," he said, his voice now gentle and inviting. "This is Hashi's your friend." My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, bracing for the laughter, the teasing, the rejection I was so sure would come. But to my utter astonishment, they actually came closer. One by one, they approached, their earlier mockery replaced by open curiosity. They asked me questions. "What's your name again? Where do you live? Do you like to play tag?" They weren't making fun of me. They were just curious. And then they invited me to play. For the first time in my life, I was included. No one laughed at my shyness. No one mocked the way I nervously fiddled with my hands. They just saw a new friend. In that moment, a tiny seed of hope was planted in my heart. Maybe, just maybe, the world outside my courtyard wasn't as scary as I had always imagined. Maybe I could belong. That winter, the cold seeped deep into the bones of our old house. My stepfather, Esma, a shadow that had long lingered in the background of our lives, returned with a vengeance. It was worse than I had ever seen it. The nights were the hardest. He would struggle for breath, his chest rattling with a sound that frightened me. On those long sleepless nights, he'd wake me, his voice a ragged whisper, and I'd help him shuffle across the cold floor to the old iron stove, the only source of warmth in our home. We would sit there together in the flickering firelight, the silence broken only by his painful, racking coughs. And in between those terrible fits, he would talk. He told me stories, weaving them from the threads of his memory, transporting me far away from our chilly room. He spoke of the ocean. "The sea is blue." "Ha," he'd say, his eyes distant, a blue so deep it's like staring into the sky. "The water is salty, salty like tears, but it's a good salt, a cleansing salt." He described its vastness, how it stretched on forever until it met the horizon. He told me about the creatures that lived within its depths, the big fish and the small fish, the playful dolphins and the majestic whales. He painted pictures with his words of big ships, with tall sails, and little boats bobbing on the waves. I would listen, completely enchanted. His words were a lifeline, pulling me out of the small, confined world I knew. The ocean became a magical place in my mind, a symbol of everything I had never seen, of freedom and boundless possibility. The rhythmic cadence of his stories was a lullaby that soothed my fears, both for him and for myself. One night, as the fire crackled and his breathing seemed a little easier, I gathered all my courage and asked a question that had been forming in my heart for weeks. "Uncle," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "will I ever see the sea?" He turned to look at me, and even in the dim light, I could see the clarity in his eyes. There was no hesitation, no doubt in his voice when he answered. "Yes," he said, the word a solid, unshakable promise. "When you turn 15, I will take you to see it." My breath caught in my throat. 15. It seemed a lifetime away, yet it was a concrete point in the future, a destination. A sudden, brilliant joy bloomed inside me, warming me more than the stove ever could. My eyes lit up. For the very first time, I truly believed that my future could be bigger than my courtyard. It could be as wide and as deep and as full of wonder as the ocean he described. That promise became my anchor, the guiding star I would follow for years to come. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking and subscribing for more. As the years passed, I grew older, and in my own way, I grew stronger too. Back then, schools weren't very welcoming to children with disabilities like me, so they refused to accept me. But that didn't stop my learning. My stepfather, he became my teacher. He filled our little home with knowledge and wonder. Our daily routine was set. 5 new letters to learn, 1 poem to memorize, and endless stories about the vast, mysterious ocean he loved so much. He would paint pictures with his words, describing the crashing waves, the salty air, and the feeling of freedom that came with standing at the water's edge. He promised that one day we would see it together. The ocean became a symbol of hope for me, a world beyond our small apartment, a future I was learning to dream of. Life, however, had other plans. One day, my mother left again. This time, she didn't come back. She went with a tailor from the alley, leaving my stepfather and me behind. The house felt emptier, quieter. The weight of her absence settled heavily on my stepfather's shoulders. I saw the light in his eyes dim a little each day, and his health began to decline. It was a subtle change at first, a little more coughing, a little less energy, but it was there, a shadow growing in our home. Yet, despite his own struggles, his focus never wavered from me. He was determined to prepare me for a world that he knew wouldn't always be kind. He would take me out into the bustling streets, holding my hand tightly. His health was failing, but his spirit was not. "Come on, he'd say, his voice a little weaker but still full of warmth. "Today, we're going to the market." He taught me how to speak to the shopkeepers, how to be confident when I asked for the price of vegetables. He showed me how to count the change, how to make sure I wasn't being cheated. More than that, he taught me how to ask for help when I needed it, to not be ashamed of my limitations. He taught me how to work, giving me small chores and responsibilities around the house. He was teaching me how to live, step by painful step. Each outing was a lesson in independence, a preparation for a future he worried he might not be a part of. Every small achievement of mine was a major event for him. If I managed to bargain for a better price on potatoes or successfully navigated a crowded street on my own, his face would light up with genuine pride. He would celebrate these moments as if I had conquered the world. You did it," he'd exclaim, his eyes sparkling. "You're amazing." His praise was my fuel. It made me feel seen, capable, and strong. His belief in me was a fortress against the world's doubts. We had a pact, a promise that shimmered on the horizon of our lives. We would go to the sea the next summer, the summer I turned 15. It was our shared dream. He mentioned it often, almost like a mantra. "I must teach you everything before we go," he would remind me, a sense of urgency in his voice that I didn't fully understand at the time. That final winter arrived like an unwelcome guest, long and cruel. The cold seeped through the cracks in our walls and settled deep into our bones. My stepfather's health took a sharp turn for the worse. He became bedridden, his world shrinking to the confines of his room. The vibrant storyteller was now a frail figure lying beneath a pile of blankets, his breath shallow. The responsibility for our survival fell squarely on my shoulders. I was the one who had to navigate the snow-covered streets, my steps careful but determined. I walked alone to the pharmacy to buy his medicine, the pharmacist's sympathetic gaze following me out the door. I learned to cook simple meals on our small stove, the steam warming my face in the chilly kitchen. I kept the fire going, swept the floors, and tended to his needs, keeping our small home alive through the harshest of seasons. It was in those quiet, solitary moments, shuffling through the snow or stirring a pot of soup, that a profound realization dawned on me. As I measured out his medicine, as I haggled with the coal vendor, as I made the decisions that kept us going day after day, I saw it clearly. All his lessons, all his praise, all his urgent preparations, they had all led to this. He had been building a foundation within me, brick by brick. He was teaching me to stand on my own, not because he wanted to let go, but because he knew he might have to. In the biting cold of that long winter, while I was taking care of him, I realized I was also taking care of myself. I wasn't just surviving, I was becoming the person he always told me I could be. I was growing up. One spring morning, he called me to his bedside. His voice was weak but clear, a fragile thread in the quiet room. I won't make it." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I knelt beside him, my hand finding his, feeling the faint, fluttering pulse beneath his cool skin. He had been my everything, my uncle, the one who took me in when I had no one else. He was the anchor in the storm of my young life. For years, he'd spun tales of the sea, a place of wonder and vastness that we would one day visit together. "Just wait, he'd say, his eyes twinkling. "When we have enough, when things are better, I will take you to see the ocean. You'll see the waves dance and hear the gulls sing. It will be our great adventure." That promise became my North Star, the dream that fueled my every day. I pictured it constantly. The salty air, the endless blue horizon, the feeling of sand between my toes. It was more than a trip. It was a symbol of hope, a future where we were free from the hardships of our small, landlocked village. Every coin saved, every extra hour worked, was a step closer to that magical shore. But now, looking at his pale face, a dreadful feeling began to creep into my heart. He squeezed my hand, his grip surprisingly firm for a moment. Then he confessed the truth, a secret he had carried for years. His voice was a raw whisper, filled with a pain that had nothing to do with his illness. "A doctor once told me I must stay away from the sea, the salt in the air. My lungs, they can't handle it." His eyes, clouded with regret, met mine. "I knew I could never take you there. I lied to you. Forgive me." The world tilted on its axis. My heart didn't just break, it shattered. It felt like a physical explosion in my chest. Shards of glass where a beating heart used to be. All those years of hope, of meticulously built dreams, of picturing his smiling face against a backdrop of blue waves, it all collapsed in an instant. The sea, my beautiful, promised sea, was a lie. The foundation of my world crumbled, leaving me in a free fall of grief and confusion. The man I trusted most, the one who taught me about honesty and dreams, had built my biggest dream on a foundation of untruth. And the cruelty of it was that he did it out of love, to give me something to hold on to, a fantasy to shield me from the harshness of our reality. The air grew thick with unspoken words, with years of a shared, impossible dream. I looked at him, at the lines etched on his face by time and worry, and the anger I expected to feel never came. All I felt was a profound, bottomless sorrow. A sob tore from my throat, a raw, primal sound that echoed the cry of a lost child. It was the same sound I'd made the day we first met. A little girl orphaned and alone, when he'd found me and said, "Don't worry, you're with me now." I cried out his name, just as I had then, a single word filled with a lifetime of love and loss. "Uncle." It was a plea, a farewell, a question, all at once. I was that little girl again, terrified of being left alone in a world that had once again turned cold and frightening. He smiled faintly, a flicker of peace crossing his features, as if my cry had released him from his final burden. That night, as the moon cast long shadows across the room, he passed away. He slipped away quietly, leaving me in a silence that was louder than any storm. The only family I had, the one who had been my entire world, was gone, and I was truly alone. The days that followed were a blur of numb survival. The world kept spinning. uncaring of the gaping hole in my life. I had to work, there was no time to grieve, no space to fall apart. I took on any job I could find. Cleaning, sewing, carrying heavy loads at the market. My hands grew calloused. My back ached, but I pushed on. Survival was a relentless, demanding master. With each bit of money I earned, a new ritual began. I would go home, wash my hands, and stand before the small, simple altar I had made for him. I'd light a stick of incense, the fragrant smoke curling upwards, and place the money I'd earned beside his photograph. Staring at his kind, smiling face in the flickering candlelight, I would talk to him, telling him about my day, about the struggles and the small victories. It was in those quiet moments, in the solitude of my small room, that his words began to make sense. His confession, which had once felt like a betrayal, started to transform. Standing there, exhausted but independent, holding the fruits of my own labor, I finally understood. I finally understood what he meant by seeing the sea. It was never about the water or the waves. It was never about a physical place on a map. The sea he wanted me to see was something much deeper, something you couldn't reach by boat or by foot. It was the courage to face the world alone. It was the strength to stand on your own 2 feet, to earn your own way, to not be dependent on anyone. It was the dignity that comes from hard, honest work. It was the freedom of knowing you can survive, that you can build a life for yourself, no matter what storms come your way. He couldn't give me the ocean, so he gave me the tools to become one. He gave me a dream to strive for, a reason to be resilient, to be strong. He taught me how to swim in the turbulent waters of life. He knew he wouldn't be there forever, so he spent his life preparing me for the day I'd have to sail on my own. Every story, every word of encouragement, every sacrifice he made was a lesson in building my own ship, strong enough to weather any tempest. My uncle, the man who never saw the ocean, had shown me its true meaning. In my heart, in the quiet space where his memory lived, I whispered to him the words tasting of salt and victory. Uncle, I have seen the ocean. I have seen the sea. I truly have. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that he could hear me. Have you ever felt let down by someone you trusted? Someone who promised to guide you, to take you somewhere amazing, but never did? It hurts, doesn't it? You feel stuck, maybe even a little lost. But here's a thought I want to share with you. Sometimes, the people who don't take us where they promised give us something far more valuable. They don't give us a ride, they give us a map. They don't carry us, they teach us how to walk. In their absence, we discover our own 2 feet. We find a strength we never knew we had, the courage to navigate the path ourselves. And when we finally arrive at our destination, we get there not because of them, but because of us. And that feeling, that sense of self-achievement, is a gift greater than any promise. Thank you for watching this story. Please give me a like and subscribe to support me, and so you won't miss the next stories.